The question of letting go. There's a certain moment that comes to many of us, often in the quiet hours after midnight. The house is still. The hum of the refrigerator is the only sound. Outside, the world seems at peace. And yet, inside your mind, there is anything but peace. A thought returns. Not a new one, an old visitor you've met countless times before. Maybe it's something you wish you hadn't said to someone years ago. Maybe it's a conversation you never got to have, a goodbye you never gave, a moment that slipped away before you were ready. It circles in your thoughts like a restless bird that refuses to land. You roll over in bed, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, "Just let it go." But your heart doesn't move. Why is that? Why can't we release what's already gone? Why do moments long past still have the power to keep us awake, still wrap around our chests like a tightening cord? We live in a culture that tells us that strength means moving on quickly, getting over it, or distracting ourselves until the ache fades. But late at night, when all distractions are gone, you can feel the truth. Letting go isn't easy. It's not a mental switch you can flip. And here's what I want you to know. You are not weak for holding on. You are not broken because the past still lingers in your heart. In fact, the act of clinging has been part of human nature for thousands of years. Think about it. Our ancestors survived not by letting go easily, but by holding on fiercely, to food, to shelter, to their community. In a world of predators and uncertainty, letting go could mean losing the very thing that kept you alive. That instinct is still inside you. Your brain was built for survival, not for peace. Today, the threats have changed. They're no longer wolves at the edge of the campfire. They're emails that cut too sharply, text messages that never came, tones of voice that carried disappointment. But your mind doesn't know the difference. It reacts to an unanswered call or an unresolved argument with the same urgency it once gave to escaping danger. And so it clings, sometimes for days, sometimes for decades. I've met people who have carried a single moment in their hearts for half a lifetime. A woman who replayed a small, sharp exchange with her father every day for 40 years. A man who still felt the sting of a betrayal that happened in college, his face hardening every time the memory appeared. And maybe you have your own version, a look in someone's eyes, an ending you didn't choose, a dream that never happened. You tell yourself, "I should be past this by now," but your heart says, "Not yet." Here's the question I want us to explore together. What if letting go is not about making yourself release something, but about understanding why your mind holds on in the first place? The Buddha, more than 2,500 years ago, saw this exact pattern in the human mind. He described the mind as restless, alighting where it wishes, and taught that taming it was the path to happiness. He understood that clinging wasn't a personal flaw, it was an ancient habit, and like any habit, it could be transformed. That's the journey I want to take you on in this series. Not a quick fix, not a motivational sprint, but a slow, steady walk into the heart of the question, what happens when I stop holding on? Along the way, we'll look at how the mind's grip forms, why it tightens, and how sometimes the thing we hold isn't even the event itself. It's the story we've built around it. We'll talk about how pain can, strangely, become a place of comfort simply because it's familiar. We'll explore why identity and memory are so closely tied, and how the fear of losing a part of ourselves can keep us clinging far longer than the pain itself ever could. We'll also look at the tender truth the Buddha pointed to, that freedom doesn't come from pushing things away. It comes from seeing them so clearly, so honestly, that our grip begins to soften on its own. If you're watching this right now, maybe there's something in your life that still tugs at you. It might be small, a careless word from a friend that you keep replaying, or it might be heavy, like grief that feels like it will never loosen. Whatever it is, I want you to know this: it's okay to be exactly where you are. You don't need to force release tonight. You don't need to pretend you're ready if you're not. The path to letting go begins not with force, but with awareness, with a willingness to sit beside the thing you've been carrying, not as its prisoner, but as its witness. So before we go further, take a moment. Feel the weight of your body where you are. Notice your breath, moving in and out without you having to control it. Bring to mind the thing that's been circling inside you lately. Not to fight it, not to analyze it, just to see it, the way you might watch a cloud pass across the sky. In the chapters ahead, we'll look at how to live with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. We'll discover what remains when you release not just the pain, but the identity built around it. And we'll see that letting go isn't a single act, but a way of moving through life, a practice of trust, compassion, and quiet courage. Because maybe letting go is not about losing anything at all. Maybe it's about finally being free to hold what matters most without fear of it slipping away. So, let's begin. Part 1. The Mind That Won't Let Go. Have you ever noticed how the quietest moments of the night can sometimes feel the loudest? The house is still, the streets outside have emptied, the world has tucked itself into silence, but inside your head, something is still moving. It's almost strange how, in the middle of all this calm, your mind can be a whirlwind. A word you said last week that didn't land quite right. The look in someone's eyes that made your chest tighten. The silence that followed a conversation you can't quite forget. These fragments don't just visit, they circle, over and over, like a bird tracing the same empty sky, never landing, never leaving. You tell yourself again, let it go. But instead of softening, the thought sharpens. Instead of fading, it grows louder. Why does this happen? Why does your mind hold on so fiercely, even when your heart is tired? To understand that, we have to step back, way back, thousands of years back, into the world our ancestors lived in. Imagine a time before walls and locked doors, before hospitals, before grocery stores. Life was raw, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Survival wasn't guaranteed, not even for a day. If you found a cave that kept you warm through the night, you didn't leave it behind. If you discovered a patch of berries, you remembered exactly where it was. If you found a group of people who would stand with you against predators, you held on to them with everything you had. In that world, letting go was not a virtue, it was a threat. To cling was to live. And here's the thing, that same brain, shaped by those same survival instincts, still lives inside you today. Only now, the dangers aren't wolves in the forest or storms on the horizon. They're words on a screen. A sudden change in someone's tone, a moment from yesterday that didn't sit right. Your mind, ancient and loyal, doesn't know the difference between a broken shelter and a broken promise. It reacts with the same urgency. Hold on, don't let this go. This matters. Sometimes this is useful. That instinct has kept our species alive. But when the threat is a memory, something that can't be changed or undone, clinging only hurts us. It traps us in loops of thought, as if thinking about the past just one more time will somehow rewrite it. I once heard a Zen story that captures this perfectly. Two monks were walking together along a muddy road. They came to a river where a young woman stood, unable to cross without ruining her silk robes. Without hesitation, the older monk lifted her in his arms, carried her across the water, and set her down on the other side. They continued walking in silence, but hours later, the younger monk suddenly blurted out, "Brother, how could you touch that woman? We are monks." The older monk smiled gently and said, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That's what we do, isn't it? We carry things, moments, conversations, mistakes, long after they've ended. We replay them, question them, hold them close as if they're still happening. Sometimes we carry them out of guilt, sometimes out of love, and sometimes simply because we don't know how to put them down. You might think, well, I can just decide to let go then. But here's the paradox. The more you try to force the mind to release something, the tighter it seems to grip. That's because the mind isn't a machine you can simply switch off. It's a living pattern built to protect you from loss, from uncertainty, from danger. But what if, instead of fighting that instinct, we understood it? Think about your own life. What's something you've been holding on to? A falling out with a friend, a relationship that ended years ago, a version of yourself you wish you could return to. When you imagine letting it go completely, do you feel relief or fear? That fear is telling. It's the echo of a very old truth. Your mind once believed that letting go was dangerous, that if you stop holding on, you might lose something essential: safety, belonging, identity. The Buddha understood this long before neuroscience could explain it. Over 2,500 years ago, he said, "The mind is difficult to restrain, restless, a liking where it wishes. It is good to tame the mind, for a well-tamed mind brings happiness." Notice that he didn't say fight the mind or force the mind. He said tame, like a wild animal that can be calmed with patience and understanding, not beaten into submission. In other words, before you can put something down, you have to know why you're carrying it. That's the first step toward freedom, not pretending the grip isn't there, but becoming deeply familiar with it. Asking yourself gently, what is my mind protecting me from right now? Sometimes the answer is surprising. You may find that you're holding on to an argument not because of the words exchanged, but because it challenged who you thought you were. You might realize that you're replaying a mistake not to punish yourself, but part of you still believes you can fix it if you think about it enough. When you start to see these patterns clearly, something begins to shift. You understand that clinging isn't a moral failure, it's a survival habit. And like any habit, it can change. So the next time your thoughts start circling at night, imagine the story of the two monks. Picture yourself putting down whatever it is you've been carrying, not because it never mattered, but because you've carried it far enough. There's a path forward from here, and in the parts ahead, we'll explore not just why the mind clings, but how to walk with it. Part 2. The craving hidden beneath the hurt. When we think about why we suffer, most of us imagine it's because of what happened: the betrayal, the loss, the harsh word, the goodbye that came too soon. But here's something the Buddha saw with piercing clarity. It's not the thing itself that binds us, it's our clinging to it. And here's the twist: it's not always obvious that we're clinging. Sometimes we tell ourselves, "I'm just remembering," or "I'm just honoring what I lost." But beneath those words is something deeper, something subtler, a hidden craving that refuses to let the wound close. In Buddhism, this is called tanha. The word is often translated as craving or thirst, but it's more than ordinary desire. It's that restless ache in the heart, the itch that's never quite satisfied. It's the part of us that's always reaching for something more, something different, something just out of reach. Picture a monkey leaping from branch to branch in a dense forest, never still, never content with the fruit in its hand, always chasing the next one. That's what our minds do when they're caught in tanha. They swing from one memory to the next, from regret to regret, from story to story, searching for some way to feel whole again. But here's the paradox: sometimes the thing we're craving isn't pleasure or relief, it's the pain itself. I once met a woman in her 70s who had been carrying a single memory for over 40 years. She told me about the last conversation she'd had with her younger brother before he died unexpectedly. It wasn't a cruel argument, no hateful words were spoken, but there had been tension, a misunderstanding, and in her mind, it became a wound she returned to like a shrine. "If only I had said one more kind thing," she whispered, her eyes distant. The truth was, her brother had never held it against her. He died without bitterness. But she had built her identity around being the sister who had failed to make peace. Letting go of that guilt, for her, felt like letting go of the last thread that tied her to him. She wasn't clinging only to pain, she was clinging to meaning. Can you see how subtle that becomes? We say we want peace, but peace often asks for emptiness. It asks us to release the stories we've told ourselves, even the ones soaked in love. And the mind recoils. It whispers, if I let this go, who will I be then? Maybe you felt this in your own life. Perhaps you've carried grief not just because it hurt, but because it reminded you that the love was real. Maybe you've held on to anger because it made you feel strong, or to regret because it gave you a sense of responsibility. We think we're keeping the pain alive, but often it's the pain that's keeping us feeling alive. The Buddha described craving in the Dhammapada with vivid imagery. The craving of one who lives heedlessly grows like a creeping vine. Like a monkey in the forest, leaping from one fruit to the next, one clings from life to life. This is why craving is so persistent. It doesn't just attach to pleasure. It can wrap itself around anything, even the very things that harm us. And here's the hard truth. To truly let go, we must be willing to release not just the pain, but the meaning we've given it. That doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing love or pretending it never happened. It means loosening our grip on the identity we've built around it. I know this is not easy. In fact, it can feel like a kind of death, the death of who we've believed ourselves to be. And yet, the Buddha's teaching offers us a different way to see it. He said, from craving springs grief. From craving springs fear. For one wholly free from craving, there is no grief. So how could there be fear? Think about that. If the craving is gone, not the memory, not the love, but the grasping, then the grief no longer binds you. The fear no longer rules you. But the question remains, why would we cling to something that hurts us? The answer is tender. Somewhere inside, we believe that if we let go of the pain, we're letting go of the person, the dream, or the meaning tied to it. And so we clutch it tighter, even when it burns. If this is you, if you've been holding something for so long that it feels like part of your skin, start here. Don't force it away. Just notice the craving. Feel its texture. See how it rises and falls. Understand that it's not you, it's a habit of the mind. Imagine that monkey again, leaping from branch to branch. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to pull it down. Just watch it long enough, and eventually it tires itself out. When you begin to see craving for what it is, it loses some of its power. The story starts to loosen. And one day, perhaps quietly, you'll find yourself holding the memory without needing it to define you. In the next part of our journey, we'll look even deeper into the hidden role of identity in this whole process. We'll see how the stories we tell ourselves about who we are can become the very walls that keep us trapped, and how the Buddha's wisdom offers a key to step beyond them. For now, just sit with this question. Am I holding on to this because it's true or because it's familiar? The answer might be the first step toward freedom.
Part 3. The story that won't let go of you. We often believe it's the event itself that keeps hurting us, a loss, a betrayal, a moment that shook us. But if you look closer, you might see something different. It's not always the event that binds us. It's the story we've wrapped around it. When something happens, our mind immediately begins weaving meaning. It asks, what does this say about me? What does this say about life? What does this say about who I am? And before we know it, we're not just remembering what happened, we're living inside a narrative about it. And here's the thing, over time, these narratives become part of our identity. They're not just memories anymore, they're roles we play in the private theater of our minds. I'm the one who was abandoned. I'm the strong one who never breaks. I'm the one who forgives but is never forgiven. I'm the person who always has to fight for a place. These lines become like a quiet chant in the background of our thoughts, and we hold them with the same reverence a monk might hold a sacred bowl, because they feel like us. But what if the story itself is the weight? I once knew a woman, a widow, who had been holding her grief for 20 years. Her husband had passed away suddenly, and for 2 decades she wore her sadness like a cloak. She believed it was the way she stayed connected to him, that to let go of the sorrow would be to let go of the love. But one evening, in the stillness of her kitchen, she had a realization. She said, He always loved when I smiled. Why am I honoring him with my sorrow when joy was what we shared most? In that moment, she wasn't forgetting him. She wasn't denying the loss. She was releasing the identity of the grieving wife and returning to the love itself. And that's the subtle trap so many of us live in. The mind clings not just to the memory, but to the version of ourselves we became because of it. Sometimes letting go doesn't just feel like surrender. It feels like erasing who we are. That's why it's so terrifying. If you've been carrying your pain for years, it can start to feel like home. And yet, the Buddha saw through this illusion. He taught that all things, including the self, are impermanent. The person you were when the wound was made is not the person you are now. And the person you are now does not need to keep carrying it. Think about that. What if the you who was hurt no longer exists? And what if the you here today is already freer than you realize? There's an old Zen parable that speaks to this. A man falls into a river and grabs hold of a branch to keep from drowning. At first, the branch saves him, but as the current carries him closer to shore, that same branch becomes the very thing keeping him from safety. To survive, he has to let go. That's how it works with our stories. They may have saved us once. They may have given us comfort, meaning, or a way to make sense of the pain. But there comes a moment when they stop keeping us afloat and start holding us back. Of course, this is easier said than done. Letting go of a story means stepping into the unknown. It means asking questions we don't always want to answer. If I'm not the one who was betrayed, who am I? If I'm not the grieving mother, who am I? If I'm not the one who always struggles, who am I? These are not questions you answer once and move on. They're questions you sit with, like you would with an old friend, quietly, without rushing. Sometimes the answer isn't even a sentence. Sometimes it's a feeling, a lightness in the chest, a loosening of the jaw, the sense that you can breathe a little easier. I've seen this happen in my own life. There was a season when I carried a story about myself so tightly that it shaped everything I did. I told myself I was the one who always had to be strong. On the surface, it made me proud, but underneath, it meant I never allowed myself to ask for help. I never let myself rest. One day, a friend said something that stopped me in my tracks. You don't have to be strong to be loved. And just like that, I saw it. The story wasn't the truth, it was just familiar. That's the question I want you to carry into the rest of today. Is this truth or just familiarity? The Buddha's wisdom invites us to loosen our grip not by force, but by seeing clearly. When you see the story for what it is, just a story, something inside you softens. You realize that you can still love someone without being defined by their absence. You can still honor your experiences without living inside them. And maybe, just maybe, you begin to taste the freedom that comes when the story no longer owns you. Because here's the quiet miracle. When we release the story, we don't lose ourselves. We find the self that was there before the story began. So the next time your mind starts replaying a moment from years ago, pause. Ask yourself, am I remembering this because it's still true, or because I've gotten used to being the person in this story? You might be surprised at the answer.
Part 4. The second arrow. In life, pain is unavoidable. It's part of being human. But suffering, the way we prolong and deepen that pain, that's something we create ourselves. The Buddha once taught a simple, unforgettable metaphor to explain this. He called it the second arrow. The first arrow is life itself, the things we cannot control. The illness that comes without warning, the relationship that ends, the job that vanishes overnight, the passing of someone we love. The first arrow hurts because it's real. It strikes the body, the heart, the world we live in. No one escapes it, not even the most enlightened among us. But then comes the second arrow. This one is different. It doesn't come from outside, it comes from us. It's the layer of thoughts, judgments, and stories we wrap around the pain. It's the voice that says, This shouldn't have happened. I must have done something wrong. I'll never be okay again. And here's the tragedy. Often, the second arrow wounds us more deeply than the first. Let me give you an example. I once met a retired school teacher named Miriam. For decades, she poured her whole heart into teaching. She stayed late to help struggling students. She attended their plays and sports games. She believed she was shaping lives in ways that would last forever. But after retirement, the visits stopped. The phone calls slowed. Eventually, the silence in her home was broken only by the sound of her own footsteps. One afternoon, she said to me quietly, "It's like none of it mattered." That's the first arrow, loneliness, a very real and human ache. But then her mind delivered the second arrow. If they've forgotten me, maybe I was never important. Maybe I'm disappearing. Do you see the difference? The pain of being forgotten is real, but the story that says you were never valuable, that's something the mind creates. And yet, once we believe that story, the suffering multiplies. We start to relive the hurt again and again, not because it's happening now, but because we keep shooting ourselves with the second arrow. So how do we stop? The Buddha's answer wasn't to resist or suppress what we feel, but to bring awareness to it. He said in the Satipatthana Sutta, when aversion is present, one knows, there is aversion. That is all one knows. It sounds simple, but it's profound. Instead of being lost inside the storm of your feelings, you step back and notice, here's that familiar ache. Here's the anger. Here's the fear. It's like watching a storm through the safety of a window, rather than being swept away in the rain and wind. This isn't cold detachment. It's compassionate witnessing. You're not pretending the pain doesn't exist. You're simply refusing to add the second arrow to it. But here's the challenge. Even when we know the second arrow is hurting us, we still cling to it. Why? Because in some strange way, holding on to the story feels safer than facing the rawness of the first arrow. If we can explain it, label it, or find someone to blame, including ourselves, it gives us a sense of control, even if that control is an illusion. But what if we tried something different? The next time you feel pain, physical or emotional, pause before you reach for the story. Notice the first arrow. This hurts. This is loss. This is change. Feel it without anything else. It's not easy. At first, the mind will rush in with its familiar scripts. This always happens to me. I'll never recover. I'm not enough. That's the second arrow trying to take its place. But if you can catch it in the act, if you can see it without believing it, you've already loosened its grip. Here's a practice I often use. When something painful happens, I put my hand over my heart and silently say, "This is the first arrow. I will not shoot the second." It's a reminder that the first arrow is enough. The pain is enough. I don't need to make it worse by telling myself a story that leaves me bleeding twice. Now, I want you to think of a time in your life when you felt hurt. Not just the pain itself, but the narrative you built around it. Maybe you were passed over for a promotion and told yourself, "I'll never be good enough." Maybe someone you loved walked away and you decided, "I must be unlovable." Ask yourself, was it the event or was it the story that truly made you suffer? Seeing this clearly is the beginning of freedom. Because here's the truth, life will always have its arrows. You can't stop the first one from coming, but you can choose not to fire the second. And in that choice, in that moment of awareness, you open the door to a different way of living. A life where pain still visits, but suffering doesn't stay. In the next part of our journey, we'll go even deeper, exploring the primal fear that hides beneath our resistance to letting go. The fear that if we release what we've been holding, we might lose not just the pain, but the very person we've become. For now, just remember this. You don't have to shoot yourself twice. Part 5. When letting go feels like losing yourself.
Sometimes the hardest part about letting go isn't the pain itself, it's the fear of losing the person we've become because of it. Think about it. So many of our identities are forged in the fires of experience, especially in the moments that hurt us the most. The child who grew up without approval becomes the adult who's always striving to prove their worth. The man who was betrayed becomes the one who never trusts again. The parent who sacrificed everything becomes the one who is always needed. Over time, these roles stop feeling like roles. They start to feel like us. So when we talk about letting go, we're not just talking about releasing a memory or softening a grudge. We're talking about something far more intimate, loosening our grip on who we believe we are. And that can feel like erasing ourselves. I once heard a story from the Buddhist tradition that speaks to this. A monk traveled to meet a renowned master seeking the final key to enlightenment. He said, "I've studied the sutras, memorized the teachings, and renounced worldly life, but I still feel burdened. What am I missing?" The master looked at him quietly and replied, "Put it down." The monk frowned. "But what should I put down?" The master answered, "That which is asking the question." It's a teaching so subtle that many miss its depth. The master wasn't telling the monk to abandon his body, his thoughts, or even his practice. He was pointing to the deepest clinging of all, the attachment to the very self-image of being the seeker, the spiritual one, the one who will arrive. And that's the trap we all face. Sometimes the thing we cling to most fiercely isn't the pain itself, but the identity we've built around it. I once sat with a woman named Elaine who had lost her daughter years before. Her home was filled with pictures, candlelit corners, handwritten poems. She told me, "I don't know who I'd be without my sorrow. If I stopped grieving, am I still her mother?" Her love was pure, but over the years, her identity had wrapped itself around her suffering. The grief had become the way she carried her daughter's memory, the way she felt connected to her. Letting go of the pain felt like letting go of the bond. And here's where the Buddha's wisdom offers a different way to see it. He taught that true letting go is not erasure. It's not about discarding memory, love, or meaning. It's about unbinding the self from suffering. You can still love someone and not be defined by their absence. You can remember what hurt without being ruled by it. Think of it this way. A river doesn't stop being a river when it releases the leaves it's been carrying. It's still the river, it just flows more freely. But I understand why this feels so frightening. When you've lived with a certain pain for so long, it can feel like a part of your skin. It becomes the lens through which you see yourself, the anchor point you return to. Without it, you wonder, who am I? The fear of disappearing is strong. But what lies beyond that fear is not a void, it's a presence so quiet and alive, it needs no label. The Buddha once compared his teachings to a raft. You use the raft to cross the river, but once you've reached the other side, you don't keep carrying it on your back. Even the Dharma, he said, must be let go of, not because it's worthless, but because it served its purpose. Our pain, in the same way, might have served us once. It might have been the raft that carried us through the early days of loss. It might have kept us connected to what we loved, or given us a sense of meaning when everything felt shattered. But there comes a time when carrying it further only weighs us down. So how do we take that step without feeling like we're erasing ourselves? We start by separating what happened from who we are. We begin to see that our essence is not defined by any single role or story, not even the ones soaked in love. I often suggest this reflection. Place your hand over your heart and ask, what part of myself feels too fragile to release? What identity have I mistaken for my essence? Sometimes the answer will come as words. Sometimes it will come as tears. And sometimes it will just be a quiet awareness of how tightly we've been holding on. And then, little by little, we can practice softening. Not letting go all at once, but loosening our grip enough to let life in again. Enough to let joy sit beside the memory, instead of locking it out. The truth is, you will always be the mother, the father, the friend, the lover, the seeker. Love and connection don't vanish when the suffering softens. In fact, when the suffering loosens, love often has more space to breathe. So maybe tonight you don't have to let go completely. Maybe you just have to set it down for a moment and see how it feels without it. Maybe you'll find that you're still here, still whole, still yourself, only lighter. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore what happens when letting go stops being something we try to force and instead becomes something that happens naturally, like a hand releasing a burning coal the moment it truly feels the heat. For now, just remember, letting go is not losing yourself. It's meeting the self that's been here all along, waiting for you beneath the weight.
Part 6. The Wisdom of Not Clenching. We often talk about letting go as if it's something we have to wrestle with, a battle of willpower, a mental command to release whatever we've been holding. But here's the truth: real release never comes from force. Imagine holding a piece of burning charcoal in your hand. You feel the heat, your skin begins to sting. You don't have to tell yourself to drop it. You don't have to make a plan or repeat an affirmation. The moment you truly feel the burn, your hand opens on its own. That's what letting go really is. It's not about prying your own fingers apart. It's about becoming so aware, so present with what's happening, that the grip loosens naturally. The Buddha put it simply: when the mind is fully aware, clenching ceases on its own. The problem is, most of us try to let go by fighting the mind. We use willpower like a crowbar, trying to pry the thought or feeling out. We distract ourselves, argue with ourselves, or push it away. But have you noticed? That tension only makes the grip tighter. What if, instead of battling the mind, we simply watched it? This is where the ancient Taoist concept of Wu Wei offers a beautiful parallel. Wu Wei is often translated as action without force. It's not laziness, it's not passivity. It's the effortless unfolding that happens when you stop fighting the natural flow of things. A river doesn't smash itself against a rock to move forward, it flows around it. A tree in the wind doesn't stiffen to resist, it bends, and in bending, it survives the storm. We can approach our pain in the same way. I once met a veteran who had been carrying silent trauma for decades. He had tried every method to let it go: therapy, affirmations, even forcing himself to think positive thoughts. But the memories kept returning, heavy and sharp. One day, during a meditation retreat, he decided to stop trying to fix it. He sat quietly, closed his eyes, and simply allowed himself to feel the tightness in his chest. He didn't name it trauma or fear or grief. He didn't analyze it or try to push it away. He just stayed with it. And something happened. Tears came, not as a breakdown, but as a release. No words, no story, just space. For the first time, he said, "The past feels like something behind me, not wrapped around me." That's the power of not clenching. When you stop gripping so hard, stop bracing yourself against the pain, you give it room to pass through. You realize that you don't need to be strong in the way you've always thought. You don't need to control every detail of your healing, you just need to be present. This doesn't mean the pain will vanish in an instant. What it means is that your relationship to it changes. It's no longer an enemy you're fighting, it's simply an experience moving through your awareness. And here's the paradox: when you stop resisting the pain, it often softens on its own. You can try this right now. Think of something that's been weighing on you. Close your eyes, take a slow breath, and instead of pushing it away, turn toward it. Feel it in your body. Notice where it lives: your chest, your stomach, your throat. Don't label it, don't judge it, just feel it. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. That's okay. You're just learning what it means to hold your pain with open hands instead of clenched fists. And here's a truth you might discover. When the grip loosens, you start to see that you're not the pain. You're the one aware of the pain. You're the space it moves through. Wu Wei invites us to trust that space, to trust the natural unfolding of life.
Just as a river finds its way to the sea without forcing each drop of water, you don't have to force your way into healing. You can allow it to happen by staying close to the truth of what you feel. The next time something rises up inside you, a sharp memory, a sudden ache, don't ask, "How do I get rid of this?" Ask instead, "Can I feel this fully without flinching?" Because when you stop flinching, when you stop clenching, something ancient in you begins to loosen. And that loosening is the beginning of real freedom. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore one of the most delicate traps of all, how even the act of letting go can become something the ego clings to, a new mask to wear. We'll see how spiritual pride can sneak in through the back door, and how true release asks us to set down even the image of ourselves as the one who has let go. For now, just remember, you don't need to pry your hands open. You only need to feel what's there until they open on their own.
Part 7. The Ego in Disguise. By now, we've explored so many layers of letting go. How the mind clings to pain, how it builds stories around what happened, how fear convinces us we'll lose ourselves if we release what we've been holding. But there's one more layer, the most delicate and deceptive of them all. It's when the act of letting go itself becomes something we cling to. I know, it sounds contradictory. How can letting go become another attachment? But the ego, that quiet architect of identity, has a way of sneaking in through the back door. It can turn even spiritual freedom into another mask to wear, another role to play. Here's how it happens. You begin to practice. You meditate, breathe deeply, observe your thoughts without judgment. Over time, you notice changes. You react less, forgive more, feel lighter. And somewhere along the way, without realizing it, a subtle whisper forms in the mind. I'm doing it. I've transcended. I'm the one who has let go. It feels noble. It feels serene. But underneath, it's the same old clinging, just dressed in the robes of spirituality. The Buddha warned about this. He compared his teachings to a raft. You use the raft to cross the river, but once you reach the other side, you don't keep carrying it on your back. The raft served its purpose. To cling to it after crossing is unnecessary. This teaching isn't just about the Dharma, it's about everything, including the image of ourselves as enlightened or awakened. I once knew a retired therapist named Robert. For over 30 years, he dedicated his life to helping others heal. His work was his calling, his purpose. But when illness forced him to stop, he sank into a deep despair. It wasn't just that he missed the work, he missed being the helper. Without that role, he felt lost, like he'd been erased. His compassion was real, but the ego had woven it into an identity. I am the healer. And when that identity was stripped away, the suffering returned. This is the subtle trap. Attachment doesn't always look like greed, anger, or desire. Sometimes it looks like kindness, service, or wisdom. And yet, if we cling to the role, no matter how noble it seems, it binds us. There's a Zen saying, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." It's not about disrespect. It's about recognizing that even the most sacred images, even the most treasured ideas, can become prisons if we cling to them. Think of it like a golden chain. It's softer and more beautiful than an iron one, but it still keeps you tied. The same is true of spiritual pride. Maybe you felt it. You've let go of past grudges, forgiven those who hurt you, found more peace in daily life. And yet, you catch yourself comparing, measuring your spiritual progress against others, feeling quietly superior or validated because you believe you've risen above. This is where honesty becomes our greatest ally. Ask yourself, am I truly letting go, or am I performing peace? Do I still need the world to see me as calm, wise, awakened? If your peace depends on maintaining a certain image, then it's not freedom, it's theater. If your letting go still needs an audience, even an audience of one inside your own mind, then the ego still has its hand on the wheel. And there's no shame in realizing this. In fact, that moment of recognition is like a window opening in a stuffy room. Awareness doesn't punish, it frees. One of the hardest truths in spiritual life is that the self-image of being the one who has let go can be just as heavy as the pain we once carried. It's still a mask, and masks, even beautiful ones, are meant to be removed. The practice, then, is not just to release suffering, but to release the identity of the one who has released. This isn't about pretending you haven't grown or denying the progress you've made. It's about holding it lightly, like a bird that lands in your palm. You enjoy its presence, but you don't close your hand around it. In my own journey, I've noticed how tempting it is to wear peace like a badge. When life is calm, I tell myself I've arrived. When challenges come, I try to protect that image rather than honestly admit I'm struggling. But real freedom doesn't need to protect an image. It's big enough to hold both peace and struggle without pretending. So maybe the question is this: what am I still carrying just to prove I've crossed the river? The Buddha's raft metaphor reminds us, the point of practice is not to own a beautiful raft, it's to reach the other shore. And when we get there, the shore is not a final destination. It's just another place to keep walking, free-handed, unburdened. Because the truth is, there is no permanent shore where we can plant a flag and declare, I'm done, I've arrived. The river is always moving, and we're always crossing, again and again. In that way, letting go is not a one-time act. It's a continuous willingness to set down whatever we've been holding, even the good and beautiful things when they've served their purpose. As we prepare to close this journey, we arrive at the most tender question of all. When you've let go of everything, your pain, your stories, even your spiritual identity, what remains? Many people fear that the answer is nothing. They imagine a cold emptiness, a blankness where the self used to be. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if beyond all the clinging, there's something vast, alive, and deeply whole? Something that's been here all along, quietly waiting. That's where we're headed next. And maybe, when we reach it, we'll see that the final step of letting go is not just setting down what hurts us, but setting down even the idea that we are the one who let go.
Part 8. When you let go of everything, what remains? We've walked a long road together, through craving, identity, pain, release, and even the subtle pride of being the one who has let go. And now we arrive at the most tender question of all. If I truly let go of everything, my past, my pain, even the image of myself, what's left? For many, the first reaction to that question is fear. We imagine a cold emptiness, a hollow space where the self used to be. We picture a kind of void, a blankness that swallows meaning and leaves nothing behind. That fear is natural, it's ancient. The mind has been trained to equate holding on with being alive. It thinks that if we release our stories, our roles, our attachments, we'll vanish. But in the Buddha's teaching, the word for this emptiness is sunyata, and it doesn't mean nothingness. It means freedom. Freedom from fixed form. Freedom from being trapped inside any one story about who you are. Think of it this way. Imagine your mind as a room. Over the years, you've filled it with heavy furniture, boxes of old memories, labels you've worn for decades, dusty keepsakes from past identities. You've walked around them for so long that you've forgotten what the room felt like when it was open and clear. Letting go doesn't destroy the room, it simply opens the windows. It lets the light pour in. The space was always there, you just couldn't feel it under the weight of everything you'd been storing. The Buddha once said, "Just as the sky does not cling to the passing clouds, the awakened mind does not cling to thoughts, to feelings, to form." That sky-like mind is what remains when everything else falls away. Not a blankness, but a vastness. Not numbness, but the pure capacity to feel without drowning. I think of Harold when I picture this. Harold was in his 70s when I met him. He had lost his wife, and years later, one of his sons. For a long time, he carried his grief like a sacred burden. He feared that if the sadness faded, he would be betraying their memory. But over the years, through mindfulness practice, something changed. The sadness is still there, he told me one afternoon, but it doesn't own me anymore. It passes through, like wind through leaves. I still cry sometimes, but I no longer believe it means I'm broken. What remained in Harold wasn't emptiness in the way he feared. It was space, gentle, loving space. Enough room for both sorrow and joy to exist side by side. This is the quiet miracle of letting go. When our hands are clenched in fear, we can neither give nor receive. But when they open, softly, without demand, we can offer comfort without needing anything in return. It's in that openness that love deepens. Not the kind of love tangled with fear of loss, but the kind that moves freely, without conditions. Compassion grows here. Kindness blooms here. Not because we've hardened ourselves, but because we've softened enough to let life in. And maybe that's the greatest misunderstanding about letting go, that it will make us cold or detached. In truth, it's the opposite. When we stop gripping so tightly, we don't lose our humanity, we reclaim it. It's like a bell that's been wrapped in cloth for years. When the cloth is removed, the bell doesn't go silent. It rings more clearly, more beautifully than ever before. So what remains when you let go? A presence so vast it can hold any sorrow. A stillness so full it overflows with life. A love that is no longer bound by fear. And here's the good news. You don't have to be perfectly awakened for this to begin helping you. You don't need to let go of everything all at once. Sometimes it's enough to notice what you're holding that no longer holds you. Sometimes it's enough to soften your grip just a little. That small opening can be the doorway to peace. Remember where we began, those quiet moments in the night, the thought that wouldn't loosen, the ache that kept circling. Maybe that moment wasn't asking to be fixed. Maybe it was asking to be seen. Letting go isn't something you achieve. It's something that happens naturally when you stop wrestling with what was and start resting in what is. No one ever told us this. You don't have to let go all at once. You don't even have to try so hard. Sometimes, all that's needed is to sit quietly beside the thing you've been gripping, breathe near it, and understand it. The Buddha didn't offer escape. He offered a lantern, a way of seeing, a path of returning, not to some distant perfected self, but to the quiet clarity that has always been inside you. So, maybe tonight you don't have to do anything heroic. Maybe you just sit for a moment with your hands a little less closed, your heart a little more willing to rest. That would be enough. And if something in this reflection has touched you, treat it like a small seed. Don't rush to plant it. Hold it gently. Let it bloom in its own time. May peace find you, not because you chased it, but because you stopped running. And tomorrow, perhaps, your hands will open just a little more. And your heart too. If this journey has spoken to you, carry it into your own life, slowly, patiently. And if you'd like to keep exploring these teachings with me, you're welcome here. Subscribe so we can keep walking together, one quiet step at a time. And if someone in your life is holding on to something heavy, maybe share this with them. Sometimes a lantern is all someone needs to find their way.